everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be a kind of early December mid-month wrap-up. I've got 7 books to talk about today. So again, I'm going to go from lowest rated to highest rated. The only 3-star book that I'll talk about today is All I Want for Christmas Is You by Miranda Liasson. So this actually is like a bind-up of 2 books, so I counted it as 2 books, but the first one I'll talk about is All I Want for Christmas Is You, obviously, and like that's, I guess, the main book here. This is like a little Christmassy romance. Our main character, Caitlin, finds out at the beginning of the book that she's pregnant with her close friend Rafe's baby, and he like is the type that doesn't seem to want to settle down. So basically this kind of is a fake engagement, fake relationship type trope that obviously turns into a real relationship. No surprises there. But our main character, Caitlin, works at a coffee shop that was owned by her late grandfather, and Rafe works as a firefighter. Obviously, the whole pregnancy relationship thing is a large part of the book, but there's also some subplots where Caitlin wants to like enter a baking contest in order to win some money so she can send her niece to college. We learn certainly more about Rafe's past and like why he's hesitant to commit, and this was actually like a much sadder backstory than I anticipated. This book is basically, like, I would describe it as learning how to move on from traumatic events and be happy, as well as like learning that it's okay to rely on other people. There's obviously a very cute puppy involved, so that was wonderful. Everybody was just so nice and wholesome. There's certainly some like smutty scenes and like occasional drama, but you know, as a whole, it's like a pretty chill, Christmassy romance. It was enjoyable, it was quick to read. I don't think it's like anything particularly special, it's certainly predictable, but it is very cute. So if you're in the mood for like a, you know, a Christmas romance or a book that feels kind of like a Hallmark Christmas movie, this is definitely it. I didn't really have any major complaints other than maybe, you know, it's a little predictable, but like I knew that going into it, so I'm not terribly surprised, I guess. Moving on to the 3.5-star rating, the first one I'll talk about is the second book that's in this bind-up, and that is Christmas on Mistletoe Lane by Annie Raines. So in this, our main character is also named Caitlin, but she inherits a bed and breakfast from her late grandparents, and in the will, they basically stipulate that she has to run it for 2 months with this guy, Mitch, who was kind of like a boy who grew up next door to her grandparents, and like basically her grandparents were kind of acted like they were his grandparents as well. So basically, like, they have to run it together for 2 months, otherwise it's like forfeited. It takes place in the mountains of North Carolina, so I definitely liked that aspect quite a bit. We learned that Caitlin has left New York because of sexual harassment and like issues with her job, so she's kind of all in with this B&B and like really needs it to work out. We learned that Mitch is kind of reluctant to return to this town because of like this sad past that he has there, and you know, you learn more about what has happened there. Most of the book is just like, you know, restoring the bed and breakfast while falling for each other. No surprises there. Of the 2 books in this bind-up, I did prefer Christmas on Mistletoe Lane. It was really cute. I really loved the town and was like following this bed and breakfast restoration, I guess. The setting was great, the characters were great. I really liked Caitlin quite a bit. She's super determined to be successful and find her own way in life, despite like these setbacks that she's had at her previous job. Mitch is the kind of like gruff but sweet character. It's again a predictable romance. There's some little bits of drama in here and there. But overall, again, everybody's like super nice and wholesome and like wants to help each other out. So that's I don't know, that's touching, I guess. It felt very cozy. I don't remember exactly when it starts. I think it starts in like October and we work our way up through like Christmas Eve-ish. I feel like it's, again, the Hallmark Christmas movie as a book. I am kind of intrigued by this setting though. I just like this town is just so adorable, and I am kind of interested in reading more in that series. So the next 3.5-star book that I'll talk about is Like Never and Always by Anna Gira. So this is kind of a sci-fi thriller that's YA. So the premise here is our main character gets into like a really horrific car accident with her boyfriend and friends. She ends up waking up in her best friend's body, and like obviously nobody knows that this has happened. She has to try to pretend to be her best friend Morgan, and you know, throughout the book we learn more about Morgan's life and like the secrets that she's been keeping. Main character Liv is obviously reluctant to tell people that she's actually Liv because that sounds crazy. She, has to try to solve all these mysteries that are happening and kind of figure things out on her own. It does kind of go back and forth between being a thriller and being a romance. So basically, Liv, the main character, was dating Nathan, and then her best friend Morgan was dating Nathan's brother, Clay. So we've got this, kind of strange love triangle going on with the two brothers. So yeah, it keeps hopping back and forth between being a thriller with, solving all the mysteries and figuring out all these secrets, and then, being a romance. So that kind of detracted from the book a little bit. It didn't seem like it really knew what it wanted to be. But there's definitely some dark topics touched upon in this book. Like, a much older man is involved with an underage character, so that's, obviously not great. There's, a little bit of a hint of a serial killer aspect, but that's not really, it's just kind of an aside, which was a little strange. There's some suicide as well. There's definitely some really touching moments with Liv and Morgan's friendship. Liv learns much more about Morgan as she tries to pretend to be Morgan. We kind of get an explanation for how this body swapping thing happens, but I don't know. It wasn't it was kind of just a hypothesis of maybe this is what happened, and it's not fully stated. So I felt a little underwhelmed by that, I guess. And generally, my feeling after I finished this was huh. So I don't know. I don't know how to take that. Generally, it was pretty engaging for the most part, but I definitely thought it would be much more sci-fi with this whole, this whole body swapping aspect, and it wasn't fully what I got, but I still had a pretty good time with it. I'm not sure I would necessarily reread it though, so this may be one to try to pick up from a library or something. So the other 3.5-star book that I have to talk about today is Mirage by Sumaya Dawood. So this is I think it's a Moroccan-inspired sci-fi fantasy. So basically, it's it feels very much like a fantasy, but it's set in space, and there's a lot of high-tech stuff. There's certainly multiple worlds happening here. So our main character, I don't know how to pronounce her name exactly. I don't know if it's Amani or Amani. I think it might be Amani. But she is kidnapped from her family because she looks exactly like the crown princess, and they need her to be a body double for this princess because she is very unpopular with these people and with the people of the world because her father conquered them essentially, and they want our main character to stand in for the crown princess to avoid the crown princess from being killed. So Amani learns about court life and politics. She develops some friendships along the way and there is a little bit of a predictable romance, but I liked it. I was a fan of what happened there. She essentially wants to save her people and, rebel against these conquerors because the king basically took over this planet and wiped out their culture, and they can't really speak their main language. They can't really follow a lot of their beliefs and traditional cultural things. It doesn't really fully come to a conclusion. I think it's the first in a series, so that makes sense. Generally about the characters, I think the main character, Amani, is very empathetic, and I liked her quite a bit. She kind of is quietly rebelling, I guess. I respected her ability to survive and, obviously make the best of her situation. I definitely, like I mentioned, rooted for the couple. I did like that. Even though I knew it was coming, I still was pleased with it. I am kind of interested to see what happens next, so I think I probably will pick up the next books in the series. If you're looking for a sci-fi fantasy book, I guess, where our main character has to be a body double and, there's eventually going to be this probably large rebellion, I would definitely give this a shot. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. So now we get into the 4-star range. So the first book I'll talk about here is Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers. So this is the 3rd book in the Wayfarer series. This is more focused on a generational ship of the Exodan fleet. We learn a lot about their way of living, and there's a kind of a connection with some of the characters from the first book, I think, where I think one of the characters is the sister of one of the main characters from the first book. So we learn about their way of life and just generally obviously since they're living on a ship, they have to be able to reuse and recycle everything. So this is a lot about like an old culture resisting change. The older way of life was to bargain for everything. And, you know, now that they've joined, I can't remember what it is, like the galactic, whatever, something or another. But they like, you know, don't want to use credits for transactions instead of doing this like old bargaining system. A lot of the younger people are leaving the fleet, and so they're kind of losing their way of life. This was kind of interesting. You know, I think, you know, it's very much about preserving cultural traditions. We do follow new characters in this book. Some of the new characters include like a caretaker, so she is like in charge of kind of like recycling people's bodies, essentially. There's like a teenager, there's an outsider who has come into the fleet to kind of learn more about his heritage. So I will say it did take me much longer to get into this book than the other two, and I don't know if that was just because I started this after like the Thanksgiving weekend, and I just like, I don't know, wasn't really paying attention for the first 50 or so pages or what, and just generally I've been very busy at the beginning of this month. So yeah, it did take me a little bit to get into it, but once I got into it, I loved the rest of it. It's the same sort of feel of the previous two books where it's like a slice of life sci-fi. I definitely didn't feel as connected to the characters at first, but over time, you know, we get character development, and I did make a connection with them. Again, we have like these really interesting ideas that Becky Chambers explores. So this one is not so much about like AI's rights like the previous book, but about like the importance of preserving cultural traditions. I would definitely recommend this series. I think this is probably my least favorite of the three, but I still enjoyed it overall. The other 4-star book that I'll talk about today is The Andromeda Evolution by Michael Crichton and Daniel H. Wilson. So I'm pretty sure that this is actually just Daniel H. Wilson writing a story based on Michael Crichton's work. Like, I don't think there was a found manuscript type thing. This is the sequel to The Andromeda Strain, and the Andromeda Strain reappears in the Amazon and evolves, so hence, you know, the Andromeda Evolution. So our main characters are racing to stop it from destroying life as we know it. So I'm going to leave it there just because, you know, it is a thriller and I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought this was a really fun thriller. There are some crazy ideas in here that I didn't really expect. I liked the characters a lot. It's very fast-paced. I think it's definitely a great successor to Michael Crichton's books. It has a very similar feel to his writing, so it, you know, I think Daniel H. Wilson did an excellent job with this. I will say at the beginning, there's like one page in particular that's like really heavy on acronyms for some reason. And it's just like an entire page of a whole bunch of acronyms for, yeah, I don't really know why. But that happened, and I was kind of like, this is weird and a little hard to get through. But like, you know, after that beginning section, we don't really see that again. If you liked The Andromeda Strain, definitely pick this one up. For those of you who haven't read The Andromeda Strain, I would highly suggest it. It's like a fun thriller with disease. And then pick this one up as well. It was excellent. There were, yeah, again, some really crazy ideas that I didn't anticipate, and I loved it. So the last book I'm going to talk about today is my only 5-star book of this, you know, mid-month wrap-up. But that is Girls with Chopsticks by Suzanne Young. So this is kind of a sci-fi dystopian type book where basically girls at this academy are being taught to be perfect. They're basically taught to cater to men's desires, essentially. They learn like etiquette, proper behavior, etc. So they like are not taught things like math that often because these professors at this academy don't want them to think. This was awesome. I just like absolutely flew through it. I needed to know what happened. I did predict some of the things for sure, but I still just needed to keep reading. I obviously don't want to say more about the actual plot because it is a thriller type book, and I just don't want to spoil the reveals for you. But the main character, Mina, is fantastic. She fights for her rights and the rights of, you know, her fellow friends and classmates. There's great friendships with the other girls. They're really connected and very much there for each other, and I just loved seeing that. I thought that was executed very well. So Mina is just like extremely brave, and I respect her quite a bit. Early on in the book, you can definitely tell that there's like something amiss at this academy, and like things are just really not right. I loved it so much. I really want to pick up the sequel, which I think comes out in 2020. But yeah, so if you're interested in like a sci-fi dystopian type book, definitely pick this up. It was fantastic. So those are the 7 books that I've read so far this month. Obviously, I will keep reading, and we'll do an end of the month wrap up. Probably I'll post that in January. I would actually recommend reading all of these books. I mean, some I liked more than others, obviously, but there weren't any that I just really disliked. So yay! So there are some recommendations for you, but let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.